Hello, everyone. Welcome to our circle and Salve Women. For today, we're going to talk about my latest reflection. You are dumb until proven smart. And again, I want to make sure that I'm saying this in a most positive way because, once you start to accept how the world can view you, and because they're taking shortcuts and it's just that they have been grilled in life with many different hurts and pains and disappointments, sometimes you realize that that the world is better guarded than they are vulnerable. And when you start to accept this, then you don't take things personal so much. I mean, it can be very painful. It can be very quite of a strain to the heart, the mind, the body, and the spirit when you feel as if people are viewing you in a different type of just perspective other than what you believe in yourself or what you would hope that others can see in you. And so I always, I think of it as like it goes along with you are innocent until proven guilty. And yet you feel like sometimes people see you as you're guilty until proven innocent. So vice versa, however you can look at that from two different perspectives or different vantage points and really seeing why. Why do people do what they do? And how is it that they continue to promote that type of understanding that is how they view you? And so I always think to myself from the time as a child of, when did I start to really feel like I believed in myself and that I could walk into a room and feel quite amazing? Not because I thought I was better than others, but I just thought intrinsically inside, it was like, I'm about to do some amazing things, and you quietly observed. I remember being like fed with so much fear about how schools in the Philippines were and the strictness of it and so forth. And so I wanted to be as still as I possibly could in my classroom and just observing how everyone just conducted themselves, and so that I would not be the one that would end up getting in trouble. And those are just the kind of things that you partake in life, and you take observance of what's going on around you. And sometimes you feel like you're doing everything right, and then sometimes you're like, what is it that I'm not doing right? Because I remember, as I recall in my reflection, my auntie, I was about 5 years old, it was around that. I know that for sure, because when I arrived in America, I was about 7 years old, and there was a time when we moved to Manila, the central place in the Philippines where you kind of work out all of your paperwork and so forth before you could even come to America. And that's many steps in progress that your parents have to put together. So I just went along with it, and I was around 6 years old by then, and because I had my 7th birthday when I was here, so I would know I was around 5 years old, if I can recollect it, maybe even younger, but let's just say I was 5 years old, and I was hardly wanting to stay at my aunt's house, just very quickly, because I had been taunted and then arrived to being quite annoyed. And I had stated, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go home. And then I was challenged. And guess what I did? I walked home. And I recalled, because, again, when you observe, how it is that you go from one place to another, it was just my own anger, my own inner just fierceness, I guess, and just it was more of like, there's nothing that's going to stop me from getting home, because I do not want to stay here. And I recall my auntie from a distance seeing me, and I just kept going. And it had been some time, and I saw Papa, and Papa was just like looking at me like, where, what's happening, or where are you coming from? I said, I walked home. With my attitude, and really just not I don't recall ever feeling like I was fearful to say that. I was really to the point. And I recall walking past him going into the home, and I was still perhaps fumed enough. And I don't know if it was a combination of how am I going to get home, because I got there, and I was definitely more of just determined to get home so I could just relax and not be in anger. And so I recall stepping out, because I started to hear Papa again talking to someone from a distance. And my heart already told me, oh, this is Auntie, checking in on me, see if I had got home. And it had been some time, but I look, and yeah, sure it was. She's walking with a guidance of her cane. And so she gets to me, and both of them knew what I'd done, so we hadn't really even discussed that part. But to my recollection, and really just the, that joy in my heart is that I can look back and think they were just laughing, quietly to themselves, as if they had been amused and somewhat, really entertained perhaps of what I had just done. And so I recall all of a sudden, as they continued to talk, Auntie's saying, "Hey, show your dad how you count." And it's like out of nowhere. And so I put my hands behind my back and I started counting. And she said, "Explain to your dad why you do that." And so I told Papa it's so that no one could see that I'm counting with my hands and not my brain, in more or less words. And they just both just laugh with so much admiration. And it's funny because even at that given moment, I was like, what was the big deal? you know I just saw so much of belief that they had planted in me. And you hope to do that for every child, right? It's like, the little things. And so I perhaps those were the little things that had been planted in me. Perhaps innately there are just some of us that come in with the mindset of you walking into a room and you're saying to yourself, I'm about to help this world, this room shine, because I'm going to contribute to it to do some really pretty awesome things. But there was a town that I mentioned that when I arrived here, Papa was just trying really hard to make his family his own here and doing the best he could. And so he moved us to this town with the help of his paternal, his side of the family, to move to this town, and so that he could be closer to their side of the family, perhaps. But it's interesting is because I don't think he was prepared for all of the adversity that would be facing. Again, and not to make it dramatic, but it was what it was, and it made me who I am. But it's for your classmates to say I would play with you, but I can't, and for people to leave because they see you walking in, it's just in your mind, you just have to go, oh, we have the place to ourselves now, or hey, I can go ahead and choose who I want to watch play and so forth. You switch up and you always make it about your strength, because what can you do? There's nothing you can do other than be about you in the best way you can, and the strongest that you perhaps can make yourself to be at that given moment. And so I would raise my hand. I still remember this in this song, Homely Girl by UB40, and I hope to find it and play it at the end of this video. But, it's interesting because when I heard that song for the very first time and the lyrics, it was like it hit home, because I knew it. I knew that feeling of, you raise your hand when a teacher asks a question, but they never call on you, and so you just tell yourself you don't give up, because someday you would see me, someday you would call on me, and I never did. And so when you pursue that mentality, you realize that there's just sometimes there's seasons where no one wants to see you for who you are, who you believe to be, and they will look at you and they will work harder to prove opposite of or contrary to what you think of yourself or what you exude, right? Like when they see that you think perhaps highly of yourself. My husband and I talk about this all the time. It's like when you come from such adversity, when you come from such of a fight, you defy it, and you end up, some people will look at you, and I see this with my students, again, that training, right? When you have a student that seemingly is arrogant or overconfident or just saying things, and you're just like, I have a student right now, it's like, okay, give me a 4 or 3 or 2, or we don't want to say 1 because you're not really, that would mean that you're not really trying, right? But a 4 would mean that you could teach someone else. 3 means that you could teach yourself, or you understand it yourself. 2 would mean, give me some more problems, let's work some more out, together, and let's see how much better I'll get. And sometimes you'll have a student that will put up a 4, and deep inside in your heart you go, oh, okay, we're gonna get to that 4. But that belief, you would never want to crush, I mean, it is what it is, because you understand, you've been trained in that moment of feeling of, this is where I believe I will be, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so you tell yourself as a teacher, this is why you say, if not me, then who? Because it's like you can understand fully that some teachers would probably say, are you sure you're a 4? Come on now, you're really more of a 2. Like, I mean, you think to yourself, that's harmless, right? But casting that doubt, I've learned it's like, don't, because they will eventually figure out where they're at in life. And so when I say this, is it my inability to clearly convey, or is it your failure to comprehend? Because I know I analogize so much of my life of making sense of it, and that's just how I am. It's like when I tell stories, and just recently when my students, we were going over math, and it was my last period, and then all of a sudden they asked a science question, and my goodness, you bring up science or something that is like, oh boy, I know I'm trapped in now, because we're about to start talking about something that's going to be really hard for me to pull away from. And they were so grateful, and they kept saying, oh, you should go back to science and teach. And I was like, but then I will never enjoy it as much, because sometimes when you're in that stronghold of teaching something that you actually truly enjoy, it's difficult, right? And I'm not saying at all that, oh my goodness, I have all this words of wisdom, I am completely sagacious, or that I'm the erudite that you would want. Far from it. It's like I learned so much from listening to my students. Oh my goodness, their Google University lifestyle, or their YouTubing, everything. I mean, they're teaching me something all the time. My own children all the time. My husband. I mean, you have so many people that are doing their own research that all you can do is take it in. And so, like I even mentioned in this reflection, is like recently I had been connecting. It's odd. Like I had to bring this up. Cast the origins of our of our discontents. Pardon me, by Isabel Wilkerson, and then we have Einstein, and I believe there's a subtitle here, His Life and Universe by Walter Isaacson. And you may think to yourself, how in the world do you connect those two? And I think when you really read into it, and by the way, no, I'm not just trying to say I read only thick books, because I mean I'm an odd person where I do like the crime archives, I mean, my master's in psychology is the mind that wants to know why. And it just, I'm reading it this thick because the person had a lot to say when they wrote it. And that's just, do I read word for word? I mean, you definitely read to the level of submerging yourself into the meaning of it, but it's what you can get out of it, right? And yes, I try to read word for word, but we all, is it just me, sometimes space out, and then I have to ask myself in that page, what did I just get from that, right? It's kind of like being in a classroom, but playing it at your own level. I always tell my students, like when I used to teach language arts, it's like when you're reading, it's like you put yourself in the movie, and the beautiful part about that is you can rewind, you can fast forward, you can rewind, you can fast forward, you can stop, you can rewind, you can do as many things as you would like, because it is about your movie that you're trying to depict in your own mind for your own understanding. And that's the beauty of it. So, I mean, you may think it's odd, but you have to make connections in life. And so I analogize. And sometimes when I analogize, I do this even where my husband is more straightforward and more analytical. He will see it from a different perspective, and he will think like, oh, okay, you didn't understand. Because, being married for over 30 years, you get to be a little bit more straightforward. I think we've always called each other out in that way, and I think that's what makes part of our strength, is that, he will then announce or suggest that perhaps I didn't understand that, and then I will say, no, I understood it, but I understood it in my own way, and I'm processing it. And if I have to ask you 10 times, it's because you understood it the first time. That's just how the world works sometimes, right? Sometimes there's something that you see right away. I had a classmate in high school. I remember, I would ask him a question, and he would automatically just kind of go, okay, give an answer. And then there are things that, because I think my mind is a little bit more poetic, and so therefore a little bit more abstract, that when I convey something, I'm looking at people like, how do they not understand this piece? Like, why do they seem a little bit more just confused with the statement. And it's interesting because that's how the world works. And I think that that's that division that we are created, because the more you want to dig into the truth, the more you want to ask why. The moment that you stop asking why, it's like you have already accepted what was given to you, what was their truth. And sometimes you go, I don't know. I don't know if that is yet the truth, because a theory is the best explanation until something else is proven to be better, right? And that's why we theorize, and then we first hypothesize. So for me, when I look at this stuff and I read it, I mean, I'm like taking notes, and I know it's because it's my book that I'm writing in it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can so relate. And I realized my auntie, who was like somewhat my grandmother, had done that in a book, The Expendables. The first one, I don't think it was the one, the movie, but I had lent it to someone. It's one of the things that I regret, because she had given it to me. And I think the most heartwarming feeling, and that I picked up from her, is that she actually wrote in there, like, I tried to catch that, that boat. I mean, it's just, during World War II, it just, oh my goodness, So now it's like, if I can't help it, I will write into the book. I was one of those in college who tried never to, because I was trying to always sell the reused book, the used book that I had, to sell it again in the same condition that I had bought it, so that I could get money back for it, as much as I could. And so now it's like, it's my book. I'm like, oh my goodness, the power to write in it. So, I mean, the thing is you are dumb until proven smart, and perhaps I am, and it's okay, right? Like, you say to yourself, then that means feed me the information that I need to not be. And that way, if I am hungry for the information, you are giving it to me. Thank you for providing me that, because then it makes life easier. Guess what? I don't have to read the book. You are the book for me. And then I have the decision whether or not to take in your information as truly factual, or do I want to then consider reading some more to see different vantage points, And so with that said, if you ever feel that way, it's okay. It's no one else's business what it is that you're trying to reach. Someone was talking about frequency because they are electricians. I was like, tell me about that. And I know that in their eyes, they're like, okay, let me explain that to you, because I need you. I'm already saying to myself, I'm going to ask this person again. And the next time, because I'm not in that world, I'm not in that realm, but I do want to understand. I want to understand from your perspective, why is it so easy for you? I want to be as close to that easy, understanding as I can the next time that we have this conversation. So with that said, think to yourself, it's like, so what if they're looking at you like, oh my gosh, she's raising her hand again, that homely girl? It's okay. Keep raising your hand. Keep asking. And if everybody, my daughter said this when I believe she was a senior in high school, where, she made a comment to everyone, you guys may not, or may all understand it or know it, okay, but I don't. And I just thought to myself, you go, girl, because, people probably didn't understand she was a straight A student. You don't need to tell anybody that, it's for your own knowledge. It's for your own knowing. It's not where you're trying to, tell everybody you can read, this book or that book. It's for what you got out of it. Because if you got one extra information detail in there that helped you to understand the world better, then you just grew some knowledge that is priceless, that no one can take away from you. So in the words of my mother, have a great day, everyone, and God bless us all. And, just do you the best way you can. It hurts sometimes what the world says, but, as long as you know who you are and that you're in search for greater knowledge and for greater depth of you and finding your true self, then you are being guided in that light to keep shining. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening.